Books can educate, books can entertain. I've enjoyed books my entire life. I have my book cup this morning, has some of the books that I really enjoyed as a kid. The Edgar Rice Burroughs, Tarzan was always my favorite, but I read everything by Burroughs. A couple Conan and Robert E. Howard books on there too, on the cup. And read all those when I was younger as well. Have always enjoyed books, have been entertained by them, and have learned so much through reading. And sometimes I study a book because I really want to learn from it and incorporate the habits into my life or the strategies into what I'm doing, or learn a skill that I want to become better at. Other times I read books just to be familiar with the topic and have an understanding, even if it's not something I want to do, or it's not something that I'm actually going to apply to my life. I wanted an understanding of that just to be more educated and know more about the world. I hope you do the same. Sometimes I'm appalled when I see the statistics and numbers and how little so many people read. And it just makes me feel sad that they're missing out on so much. I share these books, not that I want you to read everything that I read, but hopefully you'll see a book or two that I share and say, hey, that is something I want to read. Or it just motivates you to go read something else that's more in your line of what you enjoy, especially the fiction that I share. You might not like the fiction books I read. That's fine. There are so many different fiction books out there for you to enjoy. Go pick one that you really like. And if something I share helps you and you read it and you enjoy it or you learn from it, awesome. So the 3 books today, we have the Safety Minute, we have No as a 4-letter word, and we have the most recent Vince Flynn book that I just finished yesterday, Consent to Kill. So those are the 3 we're going to talk about today. Appreciate everybody being here. July 1st, newsletter starting up this month. If you have not signed up for the newsletter, go do it now so you don't miss any. Probably going to start next weekend after the 4th, sometime in there. Go to enjoylifesafely.com, sign up. You'll get that newsletter, and we'll have a lot of good stuff coming in that. The Safety Minute. You know, this book's about 20 years old, but it still has some good practical advice on staying safe. And I read this years ago. I referred to it a time or two when I was doing other things. And I've actually seen some of Robert's stuff online recently, more in the cybersecurity and safety areas as well. So you could look him up and find the stuff he does. This book, just a bunch of simple little 1-minute lessons, the Safety Minute, to help keep you safe. I'm not going to read them all, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of what's in here. You know, take a minute to self-assessment. You know, I always talk about that. You know, where are you at right now? What can you do better? And I try to share things to help you do that. Then he talks about safety in the car and at the home and at airports and when you're traveling, using fear, using anger, and some different emotions. He has 10 fundamentals of self-defense in here. The first one, keep the fighting spirit. You know, I always talk about mindset being the most important. Talks about investing in your self-defense and devices to carry and different products. Obviously, I don't agree with him 100% because Reflex Protect wasn't around when he wrote this book. And I do think Reflex Protect is one of the better devices you can carry as a defensive spray. But he talks about different things, and he talks about identity theft. So just a good book with a lot of good safety tips, things to incorporate easily into your life to help you stay safe. You read this book, you'll probably say, you know, I've heard Alain talk about that same kind of thing, because there's only so much we can say about locking doors, right? Or doing this or doing that to stay safe. Most of us that teach these things are teaching very similar concepts and strategies because they're the best ways to keep people safe. We just might do it in a little bit different way. But good little book on staying safe. Second book, No is a 4-letter word. How I Failed Spelling But Succeeded in Life by Chris Jericho, with a foreword by Paul Stanley. Paul Stanley, if you don't know, is the lead singer of Kiss. And I've seen him live a few times. And I actually have a couple t-shirts that were given to me through my brother-in-law, Paul, from Paul Stanley, because my brother-in-law has worked on Paul Stanley's car down there in California and knows Paul, comes into the shop. One time my brother-in-law, Paul, said, my brother-in-law is a huge fan. And so Paul Stanley brought in a couple t-shirts one time and gave them to Paul to send to me. And I wore one of those shirts the last time I saw Kiss, which was at the beginning of the current farewell tour. They had to pause it for a while because of COVID. It's going to end this year in December. But I was at the beginning of that tour and I actually wore a shirt for Paul Stanley. Just a little side, nothing to do with the book, but I thought I'd share it, right? No is a 4-letter word. Reading this book, I liked Chris Jericho even more than I liked him when I saw him as a wrestler. You may know him from the wrestling world. You may know him from the music world because he has a band as well. This book is it's a self-help book based on his life, and you have the Jericho principle, the Keith Richards principle, the Vince McMahon principle, the Richard Hayden principle, the Yoda principle, the Paul Stanley principle, the 12th Ninja principle, all these different principles based on people and lessons that he shares. The Gene Simmons principle, another Kiss member. The Steve Austin principle, one of my favorite wrestlers back in the 90s when I was really watching that because it was one of the only English TV shows I could watch while I was living in Korea. So I really got into the Dwayne Johnson, Steve Austin, that was in their heyday back in then. But this is just a good book with some solid principles and lessons about life from a wrestler and who's lived sort of a crazy wild life, but has done things that he shares, his trials, his tribulations, his failures, his successes. And it was just a fun read and had a lot of good principles that would apply to your life. And so if you're a fan of wrestling, if you're a fan of Chris Jericho, you got to read this book. Really good. If you just want to check it out and see some interesting takes on success based on some interesting characters, Paul Stanley, Gene Simmons, Vince McMahon, Chris Jericho, interesting characters, all of them with some, different lives than the most of us, check out this book. It was fun. I enjoyed it. Eric says, be safe. Don't lose a finger this weekend. Yeah, very true, Eric. And I'm going to probably be talking a little bit about 4th of July safety tomorrow or Monday. But I know some people are celebrating this weekend and we need to stay safe. Vince Flynn's Consent to Kill, 3rd book today. This is the most recent that I finished. I think it's like the 8th in the series. And they number them differently depending on which ones you're looking at. Some of the numbering systems, how they were published. There's others you can find online, the chronological, how you should read them. Because he actually went back after writing a bunch of books and wrote some about Mitch Rapp younger. So chronologically, that story took place before some of the books that he wrote earlier, if that makes sense. I'm reading them in the published order right now, and I'm almost through with the Vince Flynn books that I have, and I don't know how many more that he wrote that I don't have. And then they get into the books that other people wrote because Vince died of cancer way too young. I'm reading them and then donating them because I'm sort of paring down my huge library. And so I've made a conscious decision to get rid of more books than I purchase. And a lot of the books I'm getting rid of are fiction that I'm like, I probably don't want to read that series again, even though I love it. But there's enough fiction to keep me busier than the length of time I have left to live, right? And so I'm going to read them, donate them, move on to other fiction to enjoy. I'm keeping nonfiction because I use those sometimes, again, as research books and different things. So Consent to Kill, really good book. I've told you that I enjoy this series. I enjoy the character Mitch Rapp. I can't say too much about this because I don't want to, be a spoiler if you're going to work these into your reading. I can just say there's some stuff that goes on here that was a little bit surprising and unexpected. It had an ending that was a little bit different than I thought it would be, but it was a satisfying ending. And it just had a lot of action. It had a lot of the political intrigue that Vince likes to put in his books, about the people in Washington and the people that want to do this and that. They don't understand the war on terrorism, and people that have loose lips, which sink ships. And Vince, who's just pretty straightforward. I kill terrorists. That's what I do. And get out of my way if I'm going to do it. That's sort of his mindset and attitude. He does not have time for the political BS that goes on. And he has a very low tolerance for anybody that gets in his way. I love the scene when he goes into a politician that's messing with him and his team and friends, and takes the file and smacks the guy in the head with it and tells him how it's going to be. We all wish that we could do that to some of these politicians and people that are obstructing what's right, what needs to be done with their political ambitions. And Vince gets to write about it, and his character, Mitch Rapp, gets to do it. And it just makes you chuckle and say yes when he does put the politicians in their place and gets things done that need to be done. But there is some twists in here that surprised me. A satisfying ending that was a little different than I thought it was going to be. And I'm looking forward to the next one I'm going to work into my reading. So Vince Flynn, Consent to Kill, really good continuation of the Vince Flynn, Mitch Rapp series. No is a 4-letter word. How I failed spelling but succeeded in life. Just a good book on success principles from a professional wrestler who's done a lot of crazy stuff and has been fairly successful, but he writes about a lot of different, principles based on different people and success things and how they can apply. So enjoyed that book. And The Safety Minute, just a good book on basic safety tips. And so enjoyed all three of those. I'm going to say hello to Dixon. Dixon, personally, I don't think anyone should put up with the political BS. You're right, Dixon. I don't want to make this a political show, but I sure agree with you. And there is so much of it. And I'm not going to choose sides because we see it everywhere. We see it on both parties. We see so much of it. And people need to quit the BS, quit the fighting each other, and do what's better for the country and the people in this country. We all need to do that. And sadly, I think that some go into politics maybe with that vision, and then they get sucked into the power and greed and the machine that it's become, and they lose that, and we don't get things done that really need to be done for the country. That's all I'm going to say politically today. Maybe later I'll get more political with some shows, and who knows, maybe I'll be a politician someday. No, I don't want to do that. All right, everybody, 3 good books. If you don't want to read these books, that is great. Read something else. Just read. Read paper. Read Kindle. I don't care. Read. It's enjoyable. It's educational. So get out and read a book. Read an article. Read something. Go to enjoylifesafely.com. Read the free stuff that I give there, and you'll get the newsletter to read every week. Take care, everybody. Have a spectacular super Saturday, and we will see you tomorrow.